Hey, Jeff.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going pretty well. It's about September, and I realized that at the beginning of the year, I made a resolution to go out and take more photographs of people, especially people I don't know. And I haven't done it.
No, I remember that, and I agreed. It was a really good idea. Wait, you said September? It can't be that late in the year already.
Yeah, it's the last day of August as we record this. So wake up. It's time to do some of the stuff we said we would do. So what we need is we need somebody to kick us in the pants, get us motivated, get us fired up before the rains come to get out and take some photos of people, do some street photography. Who do you think would be good for that?
Well, gosh, I don't know. I mean, there's so many things to choose from. I mean, I can't think of one person.
I can.
You can't?
No, I can't. I can think of one person. I always, when someone says street photography, this is the person I think of.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, we'll say it on three, okay?
Okay.
Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Valérie Jardin.
Okay, good. We were thinking the same thing. You and I are in sync. Luckily, Valerie's right here. With just a push of a button, we bring up Valérie Jardin.
What an amazing coincidence. Bonjour.
Hello, Valérie. Welcome to Photocombobulate. Thanks for coming.
Well, thank you for having me. And I heard you say that you wanted to do street photography before the rain, but the rain is one of the best times to be on the street. So
that is
true. Already. We're off to a shaky start, but we'll try to correct that.
Okay. You're going to whip it to shape, I can tell.
But it's cold and uncomfortable, and I don't know. Those seem like the usual reasons for not getting out and shooting. But I have to admit, Mason lives in Portland. I'm up in Seattle, so the rain doesn't really faze us. But it's just that like Mason said, that kick in the pants. Like, I should go, but my house is really comfortable. I've got a lot of work to do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then we find ourselves in this position.
Yeah, I think one of the things about street photography that I often forget is that no one's expecting me to do it, right? These aren't our clients, right? They're waiting for us downtown to show up and take their photos. So if we don't show up, no one knows that we didn't show up.
And no one should know if you do show up either, because you should try to remain invisible. But that's the beautiful part of it. This is the one genre of photography that you do 100% for you and you only. You have no one else to please but yourself. And I think that's amazing.
Well, let's drill down a little bit on what you just said, Valérie. You should be invisible, because I was, and I mentioned this, I think, every episode. Years ago, long time ago, I was a photojournalist, and one of the things I really enjoyed was when I could sort of fade into the background and let people be themselves. And, I think that's, like you said, I think that's a skill. It's a very important part of street photography. How do you develop that?
Well, with time, and I always tell my student the fear of not getting the shot has to become greater than the fear of getting it. And I didn't come up with this. I heard this a long time ago. I have no idea who quoted this, but I think it's a wonderful thing, because people are a little nervous at first to get really close, and there are so many ways to do street. I don't like street photography because I do most of it on the beach and not on the street or even on frozen lakes. So as long as there are people in the shot, we call it street photography. I find that documentary photography or narrative photography are better terms for it. But so a lot of time people are nervous to get close, but you're never going to get the same feel if you hide behind a long lens. However, you can do a more minimalist approach, still with a short lens, but a little bit further away. That can be really, really nice too. There are so many ways. You don't have to be in people's face, and that's really what I want to stress for people who've never done street photography. there is often the misconception that you have to be Bruce Gilden style. And that's the last thing I would advise anyone to do because, well, first of all, it's not for everyone. Second, if you want to get punched, that's a good approach to take. And I don't know, that's just not me. I get super close to people. I mean, I shoot at 23 millimeter and I often touch people without them knowing, just barely, touches them as they walk by, with my either elbow to elbow or something. It's happened, or I could be literally right over their shoulder, taking a picture of the side of their face as if I'm looking through their eyes. But I learned to do it quickly and really inconspicuously. That takes time. That takes practice. You don't develop that overnight, usually. It's the more you do it. But then also is when you see something that is so beautiful. I mean, life is beautiful, and capturing a moment of everyday life in the life of a stranger, in all respect possible. And that I can't stress enough, because if you look through my photographs, I really respect my subject. I don't photograph people in vulnerable situation or moments of crisis or moments of ridicule. It's all about respecting a beautiful moment of everyday life. And when you see the moment, and I mean, first of all, seeing the moment is more than most people. So seeing the moment and being able to capture that moment in that fraction of a second, a moment that's never happened before and will never happen again, that no one can replicate. You can't say that about a lot of genres of photography, especially when you have, 20 people standing in a row with a tripod looking at the same vista. It's the opposite of street photography. And so I think the challenge is so great. And the merit is there when you capture it, that it's the best feeling ever. So, but if you see the moment and you don't capture it, you should still feel really good about seeing the moment. Mm-hmm. And I hear my students on workshops say that all the time. Oh, I saw something. I saw this amazing kiss or whatever it is, but I didn't catch it. And I said, well, no, you saw it. That's more than most people. You didn't capture it with your camera. That's one thing, but you already learned something, and seeing is where people get stuck. Yeah. Usually capturing it is the next step, but you have to learn to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jeff.
It sounds like this is as much a mind game as a taking pictures game. That's kind of a crude way of saying it, but because when I think of street photography as someone who's not done a lot of it, I think anxiety. I think, what if I miss this shot? What if I, have someone who, comes back at me because I took their picture? Mm-hmm. And I think some of that is because we hear about situations of, this photographer got beaten up or had his gear stolen, or, just that sort of friction just between people. That seems to be a big barrier. And what I'm hearing from you is, when you approach it as more of I am here to find experiences and enjoy experiences, and if I make a picture of it, all the better. Mm-hmm. But it's not necessarily like, oh my gosh, I have to get home with 10 really good street shots today or something like that.
Yeah, that's never happening. Now, you're right. It has to be about the experience. You cannot stress over not getting the shot, or you're going to be miserable. And why do that if you're miserable? So it's really about more about the experience than getting the shot. If you get the shot, of course, that's amazing. And it's not going to happen every day that you get the shot. But you'll have a lot of decent pictures in a day. But if you have the one shot that pure emotion, and then when you look at it, it brings you right back to that moment. I mean, that's pretty special. But just being out there and being privileged to experience life on the street in Paris, New York, Copenhagen, or anywhere else, is amazing. And to me, that comes first. And once you're happy with that, you'll be a much happier street photographer, because first of all, you'll be less nervous, less stressed, and you'll probably be more likely to get good shots because you'll be more relaxed. It's really about being relaxed and believing that what you're doing is important, not illegal. A lot of people are nervous. Oh, is it legal? Should I do this and that? If you do it right and respectfully, you're capturing a moment that will have value in the future. We learn so much from street photographs. I mean, look at what we've learned from the masters, or even more recently from Vivian Meyer's work that was discovered that we may have never seen. Yeah. And then we have thousands of pictures that just resurfaced of a time that she photographed on the streets of Chicago and around the world when she was a nanny. I mean, that's pretty amazing. Not sure I agree with everything that's being done with her work, but that's for another show. Would she want all those pictures to be published and seen? Maybe not, but she never had to say so. But we learn a lot from her work. In the fashion of the day, the cars that were driven in those times, there's so much to learn from those moments. So, yeah. You have to look at the value of the work you do. That's why it's so important to do it right, so that everyone gets a chance to practice this wonderful type of photography without more privacy laws popping up all over the place because a few are doing it in a disrespectful way and are giving everybody else a bad rap. I mean, it's sad, but that's what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. When I teach street photography, I teach a couple of online classes on travel photography. And so I always include a street photography lesson in there. And I tell my students that when you're taking a photograph of a stranger, you're trading, they're giving you their likeness in exchange for your respect. And that's the transaction that's happening. And if you're not giving them respect, then you're stealing. And so
absolutely. And there will be time where people will react, they'll notice you and they'll react. But hey, as long as you know in your heart you're not doing anything wrong, then, stay calm, show them what you're doing, explain to them what you're doing. It's more people are curious. They don't know what it is. So if you explain what you're doing, but even I see on workshops that I lead around the world, sometimes, you don't speak the language, but it's really easy, to explain what you're doing. With social media, and I think people have an idea of what street photography is. And if you show them what you just captured in the back of your camera, once they see the way the light was hitting their white dress or whatever it is, they'll be like super flattered and happy you caught that moment. And when the rare times when that happens, that someone actually notices me photographing them after the fact, because the moment always has to be candid. But if they see me before I leave, they saw me, then I'm more than happy to give them a card or give them my Instagram account, and then I send them the picture. And I'm always thrilled when that happens. Sometimes it happens after the fact. People have seen themselves on social media or in books, and they're so happy to have that picture of themselves or of their elderly father that was at the Jardin du Luxembourg in Paris reading a book, or pushing one of the little sailboats. That happened, that somebody actually contacted me because they saw a photograph of their father they've never seen him before, and they were so happy when I sent them the high res, and they made a print for him. Wow. So there are a lot of exchanges that happen along the way, but you're right. Most of the time you're invisible. You capture a moment of everyday life and then you move on. But there are times where I wish I could have had an interaction and I could share that photograph. Yeah.
Yeah, I always really enjoy the interactions after the fact, right? And like you, I'm always hoping to catch them in a pure, candid moment. And a lot of times what the best experiences I've had when traveling and engaging with a stranger is because I took their photo, or
that's true.
I take their photo and I sense that maybe they were a little uncomfortable. So I'm like, yeah, I don't want to leave this person feeling like I was creeping. So I'll say, hey, you want to see what I just took? Here's my card. If you will email me, I will send you a copy of this. They're always pleasant exchanges. And I always leave feeling like I made a connection to the place because I made a connection to a native, if you will.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there will be time where someone will get confrontational, and that's okay, just as long as you're not confrontational back. Like some street photographers will say, well, you're in the public space, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, that is not the time. I don't care where they are. If you're in your rights or not, they have the right to be upset if you photograph them. Public place or not, it doesn't matter. Country doesn't matter. You should treat every subject on the street the same way, with respect, and they have the right to not want to be photographed, and that is totally okay with me. So it really, usually it's easy to calm a situation, and but no picture is worth upsetting someone. No picture. And would you even feel good showing that picture, publishing that picture, if you knew it was such a bad experience? Probably not. So I always tell my students, just, a picture is not worth upsetting someone. It's not going to be a good experience for anyone. So yeah, if ever someone asks you to delete a picture because they're upset, just delete the picture, because you're not going to want to use it anyway. So
that's a good point.
Yeah.
I often think that a smile gets you a long way too.
Absolutely.
The camera brings people, puts people on the defense. A smile puts them back, into a neutral position. So,
and I think with smaller cameras, really up close, you're a lot less creepy than with a big camera and a 300 millimeter zoom.
Oh, yeah.
That to me is wrong. That is not the way you should.
That's just creepy. Yeah.
Creepy. Whereas, I'm really close. I'm at 23 millimeter all the time with my little camera, and people are usually very curious about that camera, actually, because they think it's a film camera and it's so retro looking, and so that. Sometime we have a conversation after the fact, and I said, oh, by the way, I got this really good shot of you. And so, the interaction after the fact. But really, the goal is to capture the moment candidly. I mean, that's really, besides respect, which is the rule in street photography, there are rules. The candid moment is also a rule. If you stage a shot, it is not street photography. It takes all the merit out of the equation, obviously. Anybody can ask somebody, oh, could you kiss and sit there? Yeah, well, what satisfaction do you get? So, and there is a lot of that's being done, and I cringe when I see it happen. I cringe when I find out, I recognize the person. I'm like, okay, it's always the same girl in the silhouette. So it's probably the guy's girlfriend that's always walking in the perfect situation, always dressed in the perfect clothes for to look very elegant. It's like, okay, it's nice, but at least just say it. It's not candid. It's like shooting them up. It's like a fashion shoot at that point. And it's totally fine, but don't call it street photography, because that's really first, it's a disservice to people who are trying so hard to do it the right way. I'm like, I'll never get those shots. Well, no, you won't, because those were all staged. And but the satisfaction of capturing the moment of a beautiful moment of people kissing on the beach or something, and capturing in that fraction of a second, and without them noticing you, versus capturing it if you ask them to do it. There's no comparison anyways for yourself. Nobody knows, nobody needs to know, but you know yourself, and that's really what matters, is how you feel about it. And it's all part of the ethics, really, of the job.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff and I spend a lot of time on this podcast talking about kind of personal satisfaction in the experience of photography over the product of photography. And I think that falls right in line with what you're saying. I really, when I take photos on the street, I really do want to be invisible, like we mentioned. But there are times where I've made what I would call a street portrait
Yeah.
And this is oftentimes I'll have a photograph of someone. I have that engagement with them where I'm talking with them, and then I'll say, just as another experience, can I take your portrait now? You know, because I like that eye contact, and I've had a really good time with that. But I don't know if I've ever asked anybody to do anything in those photos other than look at me.
Exactly. And yeah, street portraits, a lot of street photographers will say, no, they don't count because you have an interaction. I said, well, sometimes it's a good way to get used to getting close to strangers, and so they do count because that's what they are. They're street portraits or environmental portraits. Somebody working, doing, I don't know, making things with leather at a art fair or whatever. Right. It could be. It's candid in the fact that you don't know the person and you're not asking them to do something, but obviously they know they're being photographed. So then that falls into the portrait category. But you're right. Yeah, I would never ask someone could you put your chin like this or do like this? I hated having a portrait studio, so I would definitely not do it for fun on the streets.
I feel like, especially with social media, and we'll single out Instagram here because that's traditionally been the spot where this happens. There's just a lot of disingenuous photography, and it's easy to spot. Like you said, it's just too perfect, or it's that same person in every location. I feel like honesty in photography has this organic ethos to it that comes through in the photography, whether it's a landscape photo or a street photo or even a portrait. There's that honesty and that organic nature there. Give us some practical tips on finding that moment to get that honesty to come through in the photo.
Well, first of all, you can't expect perfection. Life on the street is not perfect. You're going to have to compromise. It's pretty rare that all the elements come together, the light, the background, the perfect subject, the perfect gesture. It will happen. And those are the handful of photographs in your career that you will, look back and say, yeah, that felt pretty good. Those are the pictures that are going to be on your wall probably. But that happens rarely. We all have a different aesthetic too of what makes a good subject. I have a pretty clean way of shooting. I don't like crowds. So I don't photograph busy scenes. It's always very minimalist. That's the way I see. That's my aesthetic. A lot of people like a lot of layers and this. I don't like that. When I can't see what the subject is right away, then it bothers me. But layers are very challenging. They don't always work. You have to shoot a lot to get some that really work, that are really pleasing to the eye. So I'm not a busy photographer. I like clean. I like clean lines, but I don't remove things. I think to be a really honest photographer, I mean, you have to treat it like photojournalism. And then go from there. Yes, you could remove things, but you know what? Maybe you should have thought of that before you pressed the shutter and just step two steps closer, and that garbage can would not have been in your frame. That's how I work. First of all, I suck at editing, and if I had to remove power lines and things, it would be terrible. And then I did it recently on a picture that I shot because it was either that I was going to trash it, and I really liked the shot, and there was a little bit of a street sign coming out of the woman's head, and I said, I got to try to do this, and I'm like, oh my gosh, good thing I don't do this ever because it's done so badly. But so I always go with the sense that I don't have post-processing at all available. I can't crop after the fact. I can't do it. Pretty much like if I was shooting film and sending my film to the lab without being able to control anything. That's how I shoot. I shoot JPEG I don't need a safety net. I love shooting JPEG. I love making decisions in camera. I love choosing if it's going to be black and white or color before I press the shutter. Those are all part of the creative process. Everything you do in post-processing is not photography, period. You're not learning to be a better photographer by doing post-processing. Everything you do before you press the shutter will teach you to be a better photographer. So I always encourage my workshop participants, or even people I teach online, to really go with that frame of mind. I don't ask anyone to shoot JPEG. I don't care. They can use their phone. They can shoot RAW plus JPEG, RAW only. I don't care. But they should always think before they press the shutter. First of all, is this a black and white or is it a color? Because very rarely will it be just as strong in color as it is in black and white. So make that decision. Why is it a color? Maybe the story is all about color. Then of course it's going to be a color shot. But all those decisions should be made before you press the shutter, even if you can, even if you have the safety net and you can make changes. Always pretend that you don't have a cropping tool. Yes, it's wonderful and it's nice to be able to tweak or adjust your verticals and things like that, or your horizontal line or whatever, or crops slightly tighter because you couldn't get any closer. But you should always be out in the field thinking, I need to get this in camera. I don't spend 5 seconds on any picture. And I've trained myself. That's the way it's going to be. If it takes too much work, I don't even look at the picture. I trash it. I don't like to be in post-processing. I like to be out with my camera. So, but there are people, and it's totally legitimate, there are people who love spending hours in Photoshop. They're usually not street photographers. I think street photographers are a bit of a different breed. We would never change a sky or anything like that. I mean, it's everyday life. If you start changing things, you're never going to have the feel you had when you were there at that moment. So I'm very purist as far as doing edits. I really treat it like photojournalism, basically. So not everybody does, and there is no right or wrong way to do it. But as a creative, I think it's important to know what is going to make you a better photographer. And it's really by making decisions before you press the shutter. Everything you do after, fine. If you have fun doing that and changing things, it's up to you. But it's not going to teach you a whole lot in the field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I want to...
Sure, you'll get a lot of hate mail from that.
I mean, I don't think anyone's surprised to hear you say that. I mean, if they know you at all, they know that that's yeah. one of your things. And I definitely respect that. I feel like when I'm out making street photos that I do try to get it right in camera, but I will shoot it in RAW so I can, play with the tones a little bit. I do like to convert from color to black and white and not shoot in black and white. But I'm also a Sony shooter. You and Jeff are Fuji shooters, and you have those beautiful JPEG presets that are so much fun, to shoot in Acros or even in a format like the Chrome and have that, just deliciousness that is baked into that file. That's a wonderful thing. But I want to step back a little bit and kind of dig in a little bit on the capture moment, this decisive moment in street photography. If we're trying to be invisible with our cameras and we're dealing with people who may or may not be comfortable with us being around them with the camera, what are some tricks, tactics that you use to capture the moment without people being aware of the fact that you're capturing the moment?
Well, first, you don't bring the camera to your eye, obviously. Okay. You really, use live view for several reasons. I think if you shoot everything at eye level, it becomes really monotonous in a body of work. I think it's nice to have more dynamic point of views. And so if you use live view, you're much more likely to shoot from a low angle or higher up. So you're going to get more interesting shots. I mean, there are many ways, and it's easier to demonstrate them. And on workshop, I usually give those demos to show my students how you can really, really get close to people by having your camera at hip level or a little higher and pretending you're looking at your phone, because nobody pays attention to someone who is texting. And that way they don't even notice the camera, but you're ready to shoot and you get closer and closer and closer that way. So those are kind of fun demos that I do during workshops. And you always know when somebody has been on my workshop because you start seeing them do those techniques to get close. And, there are some pretty standard ways where if you're photographing someone who is sitting on a park bench, for example, well, just pretend you're photographing whatever's above them or behind them. And it's when it looks like you're actually reviewing your pictures that you're taking their picture at that moment. They usually ignore you by then. I mean, the important thing is to not disrupt what caught your eye in the first place. If they notice you and they stop doing what caught your eye, then there's nothing there anymore. So you might as well move on. So it's really that's why it's so important to be inconspicuous, because you're catching a moment that is pure and untouched, and you don't want to change it. If you change it, you killed it. So then you might as well move on and not even try.
Yeah, I mean, I think about that, and I don't like to drop quotes because it makes me sound snooty, but the Henri Cartier-Bresson quote about throwing a rock into a pond and you disrupt the water and scare off the fish, and you have to sit and wait for them to come back. I love tricks. Whenever I teach a class and I talk about some of these tricks that you've mentioned, shooting at waist level, even using your phone as a remote.
Yeah, I don't do that, but that can be more comfortable in certain ways when people put their camera high or low or something, and then they use their phone. Yes, I've seen some of my workshop participants use that.
Yeah, like there's all these great tricks, and a lot of times my students will push back and be like, "Well, that's just creepy," and I'm like, "Well, but you want the person to be acting natural," because even people who are willing to have their photos taken, the moment they're aware of the fact that their photos are being taken, they change their behavior, right?
You have to wait a bit, but I think you have to let the person kind of go back to what they were doing before you interacted with them, and then they become a little more natural. Yeah.
Yeah. When I was a photojournalist, I remember saying to people, "Just pretend I'm not here. Just ignore me," because they'd be like, "Well, what do you want us to do?" I'm like, "I want you to pretend I'm not here. I want you to forget that I'm working and just do your thing."
But you can actually practice that in an environment that's, for example, I work a lot on series. One of them is The Artist in the Space, where I meet with an artist and then could be a painter or a musician. I did musicians at play, also different series. But I used all my street photography techniques where I was actually in their space, photographing them, like painting or playing. Sometimes it was a jazz trio, and I was they were at practice. So I was like a fly on the wall getting shot. Never moved anything, never posed anything. I just really, for street photography is a dance. And I was applying exactly those same techniques. Sometimes, like I'm thinking of this jazz trio that invited me into their rehearsal space, and I didn't even know if I should go down that creepy basement. Seriously. And I worked everything in ambient light and with a pretty wide lens, but they had seriously a window that was the size of your hand. That's all I had for available light. And then some like spotlight. And then I couldn't, the space was so small. It was so awkward to just go around them and get some shots. But that's with those challenges that you learn and everything you learn during those exercises. And I love working on projects like that, especially I live in a state where we have 6 months of snow. And so, in the winter when I'm not traveling to warmer places for workshops, then I'm here and I make the best out of of winter. So I work on projects like that, but they teach me so much how to I practice my street techniques in a controlled environment, and the fact that the people know I'm here, but I apply the same techniques and I work on those series, and those are really, really fun. So I really encourage people to do that, or just find a local artist and say, hey, can I come some afternoon? I'll be there for 30 minutes while you're doing your thing, and I'm just going to photograph you working, and then just do those techniques. But tell them, just don't even talk to me, just do your thing, and then apply those techniques. It's good practice because obviously they're not going to punch you and they're not going to run away. But then you practice some really useful techniques. It could be at an art fair, it could be outdoors. It's easier with better light, but it's really practicing those techniques. And there's so many ways you can do that.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned art fairs and things like that. And it seems to me like that seems to be like good fertile ground for practice because you're already in a situation where people are expecting there to be tourists and photographers and looky-loos. I mean, here in Seattle, it's great to go down to Pike Place Market because it is teeming with tourists and people who have cameras already. Now, I sometimes have a little trouble because I'm like, well, great, then I have a whole lot of pictures of tourists, which isn't really necessarily what I want. But you also have musicians and like there's always something happening. But it seems like a better practice environment than just going downtown. Where
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and always when you're in a crowd, you're more invisible too. But and you're right, even practicing on street performers, which they're strangers. So for introverts, it's a good way to get started. So they're performers. Give them a few bucks before you get started, and then work it. And what you learn by doing those exercises will make you a better photographer because you're going to be able to work quicker at getting the strongest possible shot when you're on the streets and capturing a candid moment that's going to be so fleeting. You only going to have one shot. In the way that you're going to position yourself to have the cleanest background so that you will move yourself slightly because, you just noticed that there is something sticking out of their ear or something. So it becomes the way you see. So the more you do of those exercises, and those are actually in my book, the more you do of those exercises, the quicker you're going to be on the street at capturing that one special moment, that one special gesture that's only going to last a fraction of a second. So these are all really, really good exercises. I really encourage people to do that.
Well, we do want to mention your book. Can you hold it up? Your latest
one
book.
of my books, I think it's book number 16. But
got them laying
this
around.
one is Street Photography Assignments, 75 Reasons to Hit the Streets and Learn, published with our friends at Rocky Nook. I think I published it right at the beginning of the pandemic. And it's been a really big seller, and it's been translated into Italian and German. I think one more language, I can't remember. And people love it because there's 75 reasons to get out, because we talked about that earlier. People said, I don't know, I don't really want to get out. Well, pick an exercise, any of them, and then get out and work on that technique. But it's more than 75 because you're going to do them over and over and over again, or you're going to revisit them 6 months later and said, I was trying that panning technique on bicyclists, but got the technique down, but the bicyclist didn't look very good. So now let's try to find someone with long hair, with no helmet, and the right light instead of, just someone with a big backpack and a helmet. So, you're going to... It's like stages, like building blocks. So I wrote it for that because I podcasted for 8 years, and that was one of the most common questions. Like, I don't feel like going. What can I do to make me go? So I wrote this book, but also working on different series. I always have projects. I'm working on one right now called Summer Vibes. And it's actually been really nice because it kind of slowed down my summer. So I take pictures. It's like a visual diary of my summer, basically. So I'm at Summer Vibes number 56 or something. It doesn't have to be one a day. It doesn't have to be of the day. I don't like those restrictions. I think they're actually counterproductive. But it makes me happy because when I look at the series now and I'm putting in a gallery on my website, it's my summer. and I'm going to be sad when it ends. But I have ongoing projects like visual narratives, things like that, that I will do a series for that just out of the blue because I meet someone on the beach who is skimboarding, and I say, "Hey, can I photograph you for a minute?" And so I do a whole series of them just practicing, and at the end I usually do a portrait. So it's fun to have reasons to get out. I have a hand series, and they're just hands of strangers from around the world, but really close-up hands, and I have hundreds of pictures of hands. So to get you out the door. Once you're out, then ideally, you should go out empty and just let the street surprise you. But if you need a reason to get out, then yes, pick a project, a series that you're going to be working on just to get out the door.
Yeah. One of the things that I love about this idea that I think just sort of like blows right past me whenever I think of street photography is that incrementalism of, like do a little bit of this and do a little bit of that, and it builds up, because I find myself just personally at the end of June and beginning of July, I took a family vacation. We went to Paris and Rome and Venice and Florence, and so there were times when I was like, okay, this is a great opportunity for some street photography. Now I have to do street photography, and it's like a big rush of, oh geez, like this is my only opportunity here. I have a few hours. What do I remember from what I've learned, and do I need to, and trying to just sort of conjure all of that up in one big blob was very frustrating for me, rather than just having smaller expectations and taking a more incremental approach.
Yeah, and it's like, you're right. It's like building blocks. It becomes the way you see. To make a strong photograph, there's going to be a lot of elements that are going to come into play. You're going to have not only a really good subject, the light is going to be, you have to use the light. There is no bad light. Or we say there's no bad light, only bad photographers. You have to make whatever light you're handed work and find the subject that are going to work with that light. So if you have harsh lights, and then you have, you can have beautiful silhouettes and a sunburst, and then you could have repeated patterns and leading lines. All these elements will come into play to make a stronger photograph. But you don't have to think of them. I mean, if you had to think of all these before you press the shutter, you would never make a picture, right?
Yeah,
it just becomes the way you see. But it becomes the way you see by doing it, and looking at your pictures regularly and said, yeah, now look. I mean, if I look at the pictures I did 10 years ago, I'm horrified. I'm like, that was terrible. Even 5 years ago. And you always learn. You always learn to be better, to find more difficult situation. You see things you haven't seen, and then you put those building blocks together, and it becomes the way you see. And so you'll see a great progression. You should see a progression in your work. The style will evolve slightly, although people always tell me I know when it's your work. So I think you have your, it's like a fingerprint. I think that there is something in the style, but it evolves with life experiences and technical expertise. I think the technical expertise, you reach that pretty quickly. That's the easy part of photography, is the technical part. But your life experiences will change the way you see. For me, it changes every day. I'm a very sensitive person, so I react to different things depending on my mood of the day. And so some days I'm very playful. Other days I'm going to be much more moody, and I'm going to photograph things that are just a lot more, there's a lot more emotion. So, but the style will remain your fingerprint, but then it will evolve according to your life, your experiences, your mood, and so forth. So it's really about finding your own voice, not trying to emulate everybody else. And I think also that's one thing that's social media has been a disservice to photographers, is that They're trying to photograph for the likes. And you're never going to be happy if you do that. You have to photograph for yourself. I mean, unless you're working for clients, of course, you have to make your client happy. But most people who post on Instagram that are hobbyist photographers, street photographers, all they need to please is themselves. So often I see when I critique some work and I'll see something really, really special, but the students will almost try to hide it from me. And I was like, wait, this is so cool. Why are you not showing me this? I'm like, well, it's out of focus and this and that. I'm like, but the emotion, I see this picture and I just want to cry, not because it's bad. I want to cry because there is so much emotion. And they knew it was good because they didn't get rid of it. They didn't throw it out, but they were too afraid of the criticism of their peers telling them, well, that's out of focus. Who cares? You know, I'd rather have an emotion in an out of focus picture than a tack sharp picture of something boring. And I see those all the time. So just you have to shoot with your heart. You have to let your heart speak through your photograph, and anything technically perfect is going to make for a pretty boring body of work. There, I said another thing that people are probably going to.
Did you hear that, everybody?
Yeah.
I want to explore a little bit your approach. And obviously, I love the idea that your mood is going to help dictate your style for the day, or maybe even your subject matter for the day. I think that's something I tend to force, not respond to. So that's a lesson I could learn. But one of the things I know about myself as a street photographer is that I'm really drawn to architecture. I'm drawn to scenes, and then I want the people to come and populate the scene. And so I'll camp in a certain spot. I'll find my composition, and then I wait for the actors to show up on the stage. And sometimes I wait a long time and I just go, well, that was stupid. Now it's an architecture shot and I'm going to move on. Or sometimes it's perfect. So a case in point, in Copenhagen, when I was there a few years ago, I found these two streets that came together in front of a really cool apartment building. And there was a little triangular shaped park in front of it that had a statue and a fence, and it had all these bikes chained to the fence. It was just a perfect kind of Copenhagen scene, right? I said, all it needs is somebody riding by on a bike. And so I stood in the right spot, had my camera at chest level so I wasn't looking too, creepy. And I waited, and sure enough, here comes a gentleman who's pedaled by on his bike, and I snapped a few shots. I'm like, that's not what I wanted. And pretty soon here comes a lovely lady with a red dress and a red bicycle, and everything was straight out of central casting. And I got this shot that I really, really love. It's one of my favorite shots. But it was definitely preconceived. It was like, I want this shot. I'm going to wait for it. There's that approach, but do you take that approach, or do you just find people that are interesting and wait until they wander in a good spot?
This is what we call the fisherman approach versus the hunter. And I do. If I see a nice shaft of light, I will wait. The key, first of all, is to not settle. Usually you're going to lose the light. Something's going to, before the right subject goes by. And that's okay. What you need to refrain from doing is settle. Like, oh, well, I'm out of time. Oh, there is someone that will do. No, you just ruined a perfectly good light with a boring subject. Or you just ruined a perfectly great architecture with a boring subject. So it's better not to have the shot and maybe come back or leave it as is, as an architectural shot without the person, than settling for a boring subject that is going to ruin the beautiful backdrop or the beautiful light. So I think street photographers, and I see it all the time, well, I can say that because I teach to hundreds of people every year on the streets, street photographers tend to settle too quickly. It's a game of patience. Whether you're walking the streets or you're sitting at a place and waiting for something to develop, you have to be you cannot settle. It's about setting a bar and not settling for less. And that's how your work is going to improve, basically. is you always look for something better. Always look for something better. That's why it never gets boring. I mean, the day that you feel as a street photographer that, oh, I think I've reached my best, then that would be a terrible day because it would be very sad. It's always more exciting. I'm more excited every day. And I can be on the street for 12 hours with my camera.
Yeah.
And every day is better than the day before. So you always look for something different. You look for that emotion. You look for humor. There's another exercise that is extremely difficult. Humor on the street has to be subtle. Can't be very funny. It's going to be subtle. But funny, ridiculous things are easy to capture, but subtle humor, it's much more difficult. Well, that's a really big challenge. So there is always something you can work on. And yeah, that's why it never gets boring. And it's also why it becomes so addicting. I always warn people on their first workshop with me, and they usually come again and again, but on their first workshops, like, beware, this could get addicting. But what better thing to be addicted to? I mean, you learn to appreciate the beauty of everyday life. And boy, do we need that right now. And when everything is so gloomy. So you learn to appreciate those really special moments. It also keeps you in the moment. There's nothing like photography to keep you in the moment, which is really healthy. And you'll never be bored. You could be waiting at the train station or at the airport. You have your camera. You're going to work on silhouettes at the airport because it's a great place for silhouettes with all those big windows. So you can do this anywhere. You'll never be bored again unless you forget your camera. But then you have your phone, so you can always
never forget your camera, right?
That's right.
Exactly. Do you find yourself, when you go out, maybe this has to do with the location, do you find yourself going out with ideas of what you want to capture, or are you just a blank slate and let's see what happens?
I follow the light, or I follow the mood. Remember that if you actually have a picture in your mind, it's usually because you've seen it before, and then it's not yours, it's somebody else's. So that's why it's so important to really go empty and let the street, the light guide you. You will find something. For some people, they have to listen to certain music, or they have to get into the zone. Can take a few hours to get in the zone, or you have to start working on one of your projects to get the creative juices flowing, whatever it is. But if you go out thinking, oh, I'm going to get a picture of a little kid on the back of a bicycle with a baguette, well, chances are that's a famous picture that you've seen somewhere that you're trying to replicate. There's nothing wrong with that. It can be fun, but it's not your own vision at that point. That's why I always tell my students, workshop etiquette when they are obviously when you're on a street photography workshop, we go from point A to point B as a group, and then I give them an hour or 90 minutes where they spread out, and that's when I usually can work one-on-one with them as I walk from one to another. So they have like a perimeter of several blocks, and I give them tips, techniques. Okay, you're going to work on this. Maybe you're going to try this, and so they go one-on-one. Sometimes 2 by 2, but you never want to go next to someone who just saw something because it's their shot. It's not yours. They saw it. You're just stealing their shot at that moment. And no photographer wants that. So that's one thing on a workshop is like respect each other's shot. It's it was their vision. I always offer mine. I always say, hey, look at this. There's a really great silhouette. Come on, we'll follow it. And then I give them the shot, but not among each other because no one wants to get somebody else's shot.
Yeah. Well, that's something that we've run into, teach our own workshops, where even on a landscape, you can have, 5 or 6 people standing next to each other or sort of working in the same area. And I am always surprised at how different a lot of the shots are. I mean, you have a few that's like the wide expanse, but, there's one woman who does a lot of workshops with us, and she always reminds me to like look down and look close. And, I'll be like, all right, here are the clouds. here comes the sun, here comes the light, and I've got my tripod, and I look over and she's just kind of puttering off to the side, and part of me is like, oh, she's going to miss it. And then later on, I'm like, oh,
She has the best
no,
pictures.
I'm the one who missed it because she found like all these interesting things. And
Yeah.
so
And be the one looking behind you.
I would imagine a street photography workshop, everything is going to be different.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's got to be great.
And because they cannot stay as a pack, obviously you can't do street photography as a pack. So if they're really shy, they'll go 2 by 2 to start, and then they'll soon, realize that they need to work on a technique on their own. Sometimes if we're practicing like a panning technique, I'll have them all lined up on a really nice busy bicycles or a lot of bicyclists on the street just to practice the technique, so I can go from one to the other. But then once they get the technique down, it's like, okay, I don't want you all to have this picture of the same bicyclist. So this was practice. Now you're going to get your own, because that's the beauty of it. You have your own, and that's why you were talking about travel photography. That's why travel photography without the street photography component can be really boring, right? If you don't want people in your pictures, then you're missing the whole point of travel, which are people, right? And then if you want a truly iconic photograph of any landmark, whether it's the Eiffel Tower or anything, everything has been done. But the minute you incorporate the human element in a tasteful way, you have your own iconic picture of a landmark that nobody has and nobody will ever have. And so in your travel photography, if you are a skilled street photographer and you incorporate that in your travel photography, you're going to have really amazing photographs. So that's a big component of my longer workshop, is really visual storytelling. So as of travel photography, but outside the postcard, which was another book I wrote, seeing outside the postcard, because who wants to bring postcard shots back home? You might as well just buy them at the airport on your way out and enjoy your vacation, right? So you want to have your own vision of a place, and they're not going to look like postcards. I mean, that would be pretty boring, I think.
Yeah, I think one of the traps that people fall into when they're traveling, especially if they're traveling afar, is this FOMO. I've got to see the sights. I've got to see the Eiffel Tower. I've got to go to the Arc de Triomphe. I've got to go to the Louvre, right? I mean, if I went to Paris, there's probably 20 places I can think of right off the top of my head that I got to see, because when am I going to get back here? Mm-hmm. But as a street photographer, as a documentarian, and I think this applies to people who take cityscapes or landscapes or anything, is people make photos stronger. And I tell this to people when I'm teaching landscapes, even. Like, if you can get a person to come into your shot, if they wander in, don't be the landscape photographer like, I ruined the shot. Like, no, we're so egocentric as a species that including a person, even if they're tiny in the shot, it gives it a bunch more interestingness, right?
That's right. Absolutely. And adding and really visiting a place, it's all about the culture. And what is the culture? It's the people. So having photographs from your travels that don't have locals in them, I don't know. To me, that would be like, there would be no soul in the photograph. So, yeah.
So you just said something that triggered something in me, because I've never been to Cuba. I've had a lot of my students have taken photos in Cuba. I've seen, obviously, millions of photos online from Cuba. And I can tell you that there's a lot of locals in Cuba who show up in a lot of the same photos, right?
Oh, yeah.
So they're almost like landmarks, right?
Yeah, I know. I have been to Cuba, and I didn't photograph any of those people. I didn't even photograph an old car, unless it was unless it was out of focus in the background, but there was a really cute little dog in the front, and that was the main subject, or someone walking by. You fall into the cliche picture, and then yes, if you go to a lot of countries, Cuba included, there is the spots where all the tourists go that have that old lady that smokes that cigar, and everybody has a picture of her, and it's like, No, you have to get lost on purpose.
Mm.
And Cuba, Havana is a wonderful place to do that because it is so safe. I literally walked into little like repair shops and photograph locals. I spent most of my time in Old Havana. I didn't spend any time in the touristy area. I stayed in a casa with locals, and I stayed away from the tourists. I never went down a street where I saw tourists, because then you're missing the whole thing. It's like, why bring back photos that everybody else has? So, and that is not what Cuba is either. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Just what I want. I want iconic pictures of Paris filled with Americans.
Well, exactly. So you go the opposite of where the tourists go. And so when people come to Paris for the first time, they usually have their preconceived pictures, idea of what Paris is. I can guarantee you, after they leave a street photography workshop, and usually on their long workshop, the goal is to put together a photo book of their Paris, what Paris means to them. No one is going to have the Eiffel Tower as a cover. They usually will have, maybe the local that they saw every morning buying the newspaper, walking his dog, with things like that. It's all about the human aspect of things. It's not about the buildings. And so there will be a mix of things, but it's more about people, definitely. And people who've been to a city many, many, many times and then come on a street photography workshop will never see it the same way. And it's like they open their eyes for the first time, as well as because when you teach a workshop, you have people coming from all over the world to come to meet you at that location. Well, often you'll have, like I was just teaching in Copenhagen, and I had 2 Danes on that workshop. I teach in Paris next month. I have a couple French, a couple Parisians in the workshop. So not only you're not giving them Paris because they already live there. So you have to show them their city in a completely different way. That's going to change their life. And the grass is always greener, right? When you live in Paris, you probably want to photograph New York and vice versa because you don't see anything interesting in your own city.
Yeah.
But people should never forget that their city, small or large, is a vacation destination for someone else. And you should always do your best work at home, because you know the people, you know the culture, you know the light, you can come back. So as a street photographer, you have no excuse not to photograph in your own city. But a lot of people just photograph when they go on vacation. And then they don't really improve, because you need to do this a lot to get better.
Well, and when you're at home, to come back to this point, there's not the pressure. It's right. You will come back. It's not the only time you're going to get this opportunity.
Yeah.
I want to wander off into gear a little bit. I know you're not a gear geek, but gear is important for street photography. We can do this with our phones, but it does help to have something with a little bit more creative control, if you will. I know that you are a Fuji X photographer and that you prefer the X100, even though they've given you other cameras and you've bought other cameras. I've listened to your podcast many times, and you're like, I always come back to the same camera.
Yep, that's all I have actually right now. So.
Is that all you have right now? Jeff's got one. I used to have one. Those are very special, very unique cameras. Can you talk to us a little bit about what gear means to you?
To me, the good camera is the one you'll forget. And that is why I haven't changed camera in 8 years, 9 years. When did the X100s first came out? Yeah. I mean, I've had different versions of it, but it always feels the same in my hand, right? Because it has become an extension of me, and I don't think of it. That's why I never beta test gear for Fujifilm unless it's that one, which I did for the X100V, and I was actually at the release in London, February 2020. But that is my camera. And so trying new gear, I hate it. Hate it. And I could try anything I want, but it's counterproductive to your creativity, because you have to, it's like you have to make your first steps all over again and learn the gear. And I don't care. I don't care about the camera. I don't care what it says on it. I just want it to be in my hand, and I know I can control it without thinking. And for me, having dials and buttons is great. I don't like going into menus during the day. And honestly, the good camera is the one you forget you have. Whatever it is, and it's different for everyone. Not everyone wants the limitations of shooting at one focal length without the ability to change lens. For me, it's perfect. I mean, I absolutely adore the limitations and the film simulations.
Yeah. Jeff is new to the X100 camp, and I think it's grown on you, right?
Oh yeah, totally. I sort of broke out of my own little box by taking it to a trip to New York, New York and Washington D.C. My wife and I went, and I was like, okay, this is just going to be a vacation, so I'm not going to bring my XT3 and 3 lenses and try, like all of that. And it was great. I have a hard time just having the one wide focal length. I think just because I've shot so long with various focal lengths. So that's an ongoing challenge for me. But ongoing challenges are great.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a lot of power in the limitations too.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I still like my Sony with my 50 on there.
Well, again, my workshops are not. I have nothing to do with Fujifilm, and I have people with Leica, Sony's, Olympus, Fuji's on every workshop, and I really don't care. Some people will bring a brand new Leica that they haven't mastered yet, and then they end up spending the whole workshop with their phone because they realize, like, well, that was dumb. I'm so focused on settings that I don't see what's happening. I said, okay, switch to the phone. At least you'll learn to see. So it's really about forgetting the camera's there and letting it do a lot of the work, and trusting it too. It's like a good friend. Yeah.
I think that's a great update to the old saying that the best camera is the one that you've forgotten that you have, instead of the best camera is the one that you have with you.
Absolutely, yeah.
Just because everybody does have the cameras.
And there's no bad camera. I mean, really, it's like there's no bad light, there's no bad camera. It's just it has to fit you. So find one that fits you. And if people always ask, well, should I get this? Should I get that? Or I want to get a Leica. I'm like, you know what? If you have the money and that little red dot makes you want to go out more, maybe then you will become a better photographer. The only way you will become better is if you go out more. So if the camera helps you do that because you feel so good about that really sexy camera, and you're going to take it out every day, then by all means, get it.
Do it. Yeah.
Because that's how you'll become better, not by having it sit on your desk. So, yeah.
That's a great point. We talked about this in a recent episode that, for me, gear, part of the enjoyment of photography is geeking out about gear a little bit. And it's okay. It's okay. We don't have to be, we don't all have to bang around with the Pentax K1000 we had when we were 16 and get by with that.
If everybody was like me, man, the whole industry would collapse. So I'm glad there are a lot of gear geeks out there, because that's why we have better cameras. So it's good.
Absolutely. That's a good point.
Yeah.
All right, Valerie, what is up next for you? You're very busy with workshops, so...
Yes, fall is always busy, although it seems like this year, because I had to stop for a year and a half, during the thick of the pandemic. When I started again last year, it's like, it felt so good. I felt alive again. It was like my oxygen. So I just got back from Copenhagen. Next week, I'm heading for the Normandy workshop, which is my... only all-inclusive workshop, but that's really a special workshop because Normandy is where I was born. My small group is picked up in Paris with a chauffeur, brought to a 5-star luxury beachfront hotel for a week, and we go on photo adventures, which is more it's about visual storytelling. So of course there is a big street photography component, but it's much more than that. It's really a travel photography workshop, and it's a week of, and then they get brought back to Paris. So it's like the worry-free, full luxury, all-inclusive. Not all inclusive, because of course they have some dinners on their own. Who wants to be with the same people every night for dinner? But so and it's home. It's really multi-generation from Normandy. I mean, as far as you can go in the family tree from Normandy. So it's really special to me, not to share only the beauty of the region and the culture, but all the family stories, that I've collected along the way. So that's my once a year special 1 week in Normandy workshop. Then I'm back in the States for 2-3 weeks, then back to Paris for the October Paris workshop. So, and 2023 is already on the schedule and filling up. And it starts in January in Paris, because I love January in Paris. Now, if you want authenticity in the most visited country, the most visited city in the world, if you want really authenticity, it's January. People look beautiful. They have their long coats, the hats. So you have really beautiful subject. The light is very special, and you have very few tourists. And so if you can take a little bit of dampness, and it's really it's one of my favorite times to go. So
yeah. I mean, before I really became a photographer, my wife and I took a trip to the UK in, I think it was March.
Not a good time to be in the UK if you like fair weather.
Not a good time there. But we had only been married for a couple of years. It was super inexpensive because it was off season, and the lodging was really inexpensive. And it turned out, for the heavens were grateful to us for some reason, because I think we only had rain maybe 2 days of the entire trip. But it was wonderful because there were so few people. Everybody there was just happy to see you, because otherwise, the bed and breakfast would not be, filled up. And so just getting away from those those really popular July, August travel, even though sometimes it's the most convenient. The trip that we took, we didn't really have a whole lot of choice, because we went with some people who were already had planned for this trip. And so, July and August,
it's crazy.
Sorry, June and July. Yeah. It was 105 degrees in Rome, and not my first choice. But at the same time, I was in Rome, so that was okay,
Exactly. But so I encourage people to try things that are a little bit, different than what they thought. Paris in the spring is amazing, but if you can handle a little bit of weather, it's very authentic in January. So I recommend it.
Well, I'm also looking on your website, and we'll put a link to your workshop page in our show notes. But you've got some U.S.-based workshops next year. You've got New York City in April, and Minneapolis, your other hometown, in June. But you've got one that's really interesting, and going back to Paris, which is another one of your homes.
Yeah.
Right. You've got a workshop called See Paris with Your Heart.
Yep. And that's not street photography at all, but I find that a lot of street photographers are drawn to that. And so it's contemplative photography. So, and I call it See with Your Heart, because that's what it is. It's letting go of everything you've learned and really making photographs that will resonate with you. I mean, reacting to reflections in windows and things like that will, or colors, whatever it is. So it is a new workshop. I taught it in Paris and Rome this year. And people can do that only, or do the street photography workshop right after or right before, I don't remember. But I was surprised, because I thought it would be a different audience. And I think it all started because I taught this class online during the pandemic when people were stuck. And I wanted to open people's eyes to contemplative type of photography, and to start seeing even their homes differently, and be able to play with our cameras in a limited space.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was so successful. And then I wrote an ebook about that. And then I thought, well, I'm gonna try to teach a class, which is it's not an easy class to teach, because that's going to mean something different to everyone. So it's really about helping photographers find what it means for them and what resonates with them. But it was really successful this year, and I can't wait to do it again. And street photographers who took it, and I didn't think street photographers would do that, but they'd been on my street photography workshop and said, oh, I'm going to try that. Actually said, wow, on the street now, I work faster and I see better because I took that other class, and now I can play with reflections, because I played with reflection with inanimate objects. Now I can play with reflection, including the human element, but I can do it quicker because I learned how to use that. So that's been kind of fun. So I'm excited about that, and I'll probably add another one next year. I'm actually going to try to fit another Copenhagen class, and it will be hybrid, street followed by see Copenhagen with your heart, because if there is one place that's special where you can capture a feeling with photographs, that would be Copenhagen.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to fit it next year. If I can't, then it will be the year after.
How many people are in these workshops?
10 people.
Just 10 people. So you mentioned, most of the time on their street photography workshops, you're kind of giving them some guidance and then sending them out to practice.
Well, I always go with them. I'm always on the street. I'm always on the street with them. But they don't shoot in a group.
Right. You're not leaning over their shoulder all the time, are you?
No, because you can't. When they're in a neighborhood, we'll go from point A to point B together, then they spread out for an hour and a half. Usually we regroup after an hour and say if they need more time, then we add more time. And then we move on to the next point of interest and then rinse and repeat, right? Mm-hmm. And during that time, when they're all working on different things that they're looking for, or that they just learn, they apply a new technique, then that's when I get to work with them individually. And that's when so they're kind of spread out in our neighborhood. And if you look at my Google map, I'm like this. I usually 30 miles because I kind of check on everyone, or sometimes I'll look from a distance, like, okay, well, they're trying to get a silhouette, but they're standing straight when they should get it from a lower angle to get more sky behind the silhouette. Sure. So then I'll go and interfere and say, okay, here, get down like this, and then you'll have a stronger shot. So that's when I do that. The individual time. Yeah. So it's fun, but I'm always there taking pictures. So, so I always have usually a lot of witnesses when I take some of my shots in the workshop, because usually with participants. Yeah.
So a Valérie Jardin workshop is not, I'm going to take you to Paris, get you some coffee and cut you loose.
No.
You do a lot of instruction. You do a lot of mentoring.
Yeah, it's all on the streets, and then we have critique sessions, of course, in classroom. But yeah, they're on the streets every day, and I'm on the streets with them. Excellent. And even after hours, we usually hang out, and I can't help myself. I still have to teach over dinner, and they keep shooting because the camera can never be in the bag. Actually, I don't even want a bag. No bag, no lens cap there. Extra battery.
Nothing to hold you back.
And good shoes.
I see something else on your website that falls right into line with your workshops, and that is an online mentorship over the winter. And I think that's really interesting. You're obviously a gifted educator, and anybody who's read your books or listened to your podcast or gone on one of your workshops knows that you have a passion for teaching. Tell me about this mentorship program. If people have come on your workshops, is this an extension of that? It
could be, or it could be for people who will never go on a workshop. Not everybody can. And that's why I write books, because I want to share as much as possible. And that's why I did podcasting. It was to share my love for photography. So I'm working on it right now. It's going to be probably a very small group of people, maybe 10 or 12. And we will have a class and then it'll be like The Amazing Race. They'll have a class on one technique, and then they're going to go out for a week and work on that technique. And then we regroup on Zoom and do a critique. And then do another technique and that. So kind of an extension of my book in a way, but with critique, which is the important part of any education. So so I'm thinking it's going to be small but very personal. And I'm working on it right now, but it won't start probably until November when I slow down a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. That sounds wonderful. We'll also include a link to that page in the show notes, because that's a very special opportunity, I think, for people who want to deepen their skill sets. I think a lot of times, and Jeff and I have led many workshops. We're kind of off of that right now, but family life is intruded. But one of the things that I really enjoyed about workshops is that time you get to spend and build those relationships, but then it ends. And these
the camaraderie, and then there are tears at the end. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And then people come again together. They meet on a workshop and they come to a different destination together. So friendships develop. That's beautiful. I mean, sometimes I have 100% repeat in a workshop. So I feel like I'm going on vacation with 10 friends because they've been on other workshops before. And that's so much fun. Yeah. I don't even understand why, I would not want to spend the whole day on the street with them. It's like,
of course,
that's the reason why I'm doing this, is to be out on the street and share, in the field. So, or on the street, not a field, but.
Well, I'm very interested in that Copenhagen.
Okay.
A couple of workshops together would be nice. Make that package. But I'll have to see if I can squeeze in there with all your old friends. If you get room for them.
I know. Sometimes I've had workshops sell in an hour after the. It's like sometimes I feel like I'm a rock band. When they're a concert ticket. One time a workshop, the Normandy workshop that I had not offered for 2-3 years. When I announced that I was coming back, it already sells from the newsletter. It doesn't. I usually online, if there's one spot that comes open, then I put it online. And I remember because it's the first registration came. I don't even think they had the time to look at the price. It came like I had barely pressed the button, like send the newsletter, the first registration. And then within an hour, it was sold out. And then I felt really bad because the Australians were still sleeping and they never had a chance. And I usually have Australians on my workshop, that I felt so bad. So now I tried to give a little bit of warning, but it doesn't fill as quickly because of the pandemic. So, but some of them were filled like very quickly a year in advance. But I find that there are a lot more last minute cancellations also because of the pandemic, and people are used to, I can cancel anytime. So a waiting list is always a good idea. Sometimes you have to go down 10 people on a waiting list to fill a spot because, people made other plans and then they can't do it. So waiting lists really work.
Well, that's a good tip then, because I noticed a lot of your workshops have waiting lists right now. Yeah. So people, if you're interested in these, jump on that wait list, take that chance, roll the dice, see what you get.
Yeah.
Well, Valerie, this has been so wonderful. I'm inspired to get out and take photos of my own town. I'm inspired to travel some more. It's exactly the kick in the pants I needed to get out and take some people photos and not just fall back to my old habits of landscapes and architecture.
I don't think you should actually just do one thing. I think if you have a good photographer, you should be able to take pictures of everything and make compelling photographs. But whatever makes you happy, really.
Yeah.
And and there are people who hate street photography, and why would they want to do it if they hate it? I mean, it comes down to, does it make you happy or it doesn't? And that's that. So yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that actually leads me to one. I'm going to sneak one more question in.
I could be here all day because I can talk forever.
I know. We could too. I'm sure. Are you an introvert or an extrovert?
I'm an extrovert.
Okay.
Yeah. Very much so. Yeah. I mean, actually, to the point where I'll see someone and I'll start a conversation thinking, I'm going to probably do a street portrait after. And then I'm in the conversation and we've shared our life stories and we parted ways, and I completely forgot that the original plan was to take a picture. So yeah, I talk with strangers all the time. My kids used to think, oh no, there she goes again.
Oh no.
But then now they learn that, but they've traveled all over the world and they tell me now that they're adults that the most memorable vacations or moments of vacations were always the interaction with the locals.
Mm-hmm.
And that may not have happened if I hadn't been a photographer. So they realize how valuable that experience was at the time. So
yeah, camera is a bridge to people for sure. Well, thank you. Thanks for indulging me. I'm kind of in between introvert and extrovert. I can go either way. And so for me, it's not necessarily draining to go out and meet people and hang out with them, but it can be.
I have a lot of introvert. There are a lot of introvert street photographers, actually. I always have about half and half on workshops, surprisingly. So, yeah.
That doesn't surprise me at all. I find it a great way to experience the world. The camera's a bridge, but it can also be a nice little wall.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Protective shell.
absolutely. Yeah, and when you're a street photographer, you're usually alone on the street. So when you practice, so yeah, there's much to say about that. Yeah.
Nice.
Well, thank you so much, Valerie. We're going to have links to all of your books and workshops and goodies on our show notes page, and you can obviously go find you at valeriejardinphotography.com. And we appreciate you so much taking the time. I know you're very busy and in between trips. And hopefully we'll be able to reconnect again some other time, maybe over in Europe, maybe in Copenhagen. We'll see what happens.
Sounds good. Or in Paris. Paris is always a good idea, right?
If we have to, I suppose.
I heard there's good coffee there. It seems like a nice town.
Thank you, guys. It was really fun.
Thank you so much.